Every morning before the world speaks to you, you must speak to yourself. Because if you don't define your day, the day will define you. If you don't program your mind, your environment will program it for you. And most people wake up and immediately surrender, scrolling, reacting, worrying, comparing, never realizing they've already lost control of their mindset before the day even begins. But not you. You're here because you're ready to take ownership of your inner voice. You're ready to understand that the most powerful conversation you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. Not your friends, not your family, not your critics. The voice that shapes your destiny is the one inside your own mind. And the truth is simple. Your life moves in the direction of your dominant thoughts. So, if you want a different life, you must start speaking different words, deliberately, consistently, every single morning. There are 5 lines, just 5, that can transform the way you think, the way you act, and ultimately the way you live. The first thing you must say to yourself is this: I am responsible for my life. Responsibility is where your transformation truly begins. Not motivation, not talent, not opportunity, responsibility. Because the moment you say, I am responsible for my life, you draw a line between the person you used to be and the person you are choosing to become. Most people never cross that line. They spend their lives explaining instead of executing, blaming instead of building, justifying instead of growing. But the person who rises, truly rises, is the one who understands that responsibility is not something to avoid, it is something to embrace. When you wake up in the morning and speak those words, I am responsible for my life, you are not simply repeating a sentence. You are making a declaration of ownership. You are telling yourself that everything from this point forward is in your hands. Not because you control everything that happens, but because you control how you respond to everything that happens. And that right there is the difference between a victim mindset and a victor mindset. You see, a victim asks, why is this happening to me? But a responsible person asks, what can I do about this? The victim waits for change. The responsible person creates it. The victim looks outward for answers. The responsible person looks inward for solutions. And that shift, though it seems small, has the power to completely alter the direction of your life. The danger of avoiding responsibility is that it feels comfortable in the moment. Blaming others gives you temporary relief. It protects your ego. It allows you to avoid the discomfort of confronting your own decisions. But what it also does is trap you. Because the moment you blame something outside of you, you give it power over you. You say, in essence, Kamda, my life depends on something I cannot control. And if that is true, then you are stuck. But the moment you take responsibility, you take back control. You may not have caused everything in your life, but you are responsible for what you do with it. And that realization is liberating. It means that no matter where you are, no matter what you've been through, you are not finished. You still have authority over your next move. Responsibility also requires honesty, deep, uncomfortable honesty. It forces you to look at your habits, your choices, your patterns, and admit where you have been holding yourself back. Not in a way that condemns you, but in a way that empowers you. Because you cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. Growth begins where denial ends. There will be moments when responsibility feels heavy, when it would be easier to point fingers to say, it's not my fault, to wait for someone else to fix things. But understand this, responsibility is not about fault, it is about control. It is not about blaming yourself for everything that has gone wrong. It is about deciding that you will not stay where things have gone wrong. When you accept responsibility, you stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop saying, I'll start when I have more time, or I'll move when I feel more confident, or I'll change when things get easier. You realize that waiting is just another form of avoidance, and you begin to act with what you have where you are right now. This is where discipline is born, because once you accept that your life is your responsibility, you can no longer negotiate with your excuses. You can no longer say, I don't feel like it today, and let that be the end of the story. Your feelings may influence you, but they no longer control you. Responsibility teaches you to act based on commitment, not emotion. And here is something powerful. Responsibility builds self-respect. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, every time you follow through on what you said you would do, every time you take action instead of making excuses, you send a message to your mind, I can trust myself. And that trust becomes confidence. Not the kind of confidence that is loud and fragile, but the kind that is quiet and unshakable. On the other hand, every time you avoid responsibility, you weaken that trust. You tell yourself, I say things, but I don't follow through. And over time, that creates doubt. Not just doubt in your abilities, but doubt in your own word. And if you cannot trust yourself, it becomes very difficult to build anything meaningful. Responsibility also changes the way you see challenges. Instead of viewing them as obstacles that block your path, you begin to see them as opportunities to prove your growth. You ask, what is this situation teaching me? How can I use this to become better? And that mindset transforms pressure into progress. There is a level of maturity that comes with responsibility. It means you stop needing constant validation from others. You stop waiting for someone to tell you what to do, how to live, or who to become. You begin to lead yourself. And self-leadership is one of the most powerful skills you can ever develop because it ensures that no matter where you go, you carry direction within you. But understand this clearly. Responsibility is not about perfection. You will make mistakes. You will fall short. You will have days where you don't show up the way you intended. But responsibility means you don't stay there. You don't hide from it. You don't pretend it didn't happen. You face it, you learn from it, and you move forward stronger. It also means you take ownership of your time. Time is one of the few things in life that once gone, you cannot recover. When you say you are responsible for your life, you are also saying you are responsible for how you spend your time. That means being intentional. It means recognizing that every hour you waste is an hour you could have invested in your growth. And this is where many people struggle. Not because they lack potential, but because they lack discipline in how they use their time. They allow distractions to control their schedule. They allow comfort to replace commitment. But when you truly accept responsibility, you begin to guard your time. You begin to ask yourself, is this helping me grow or is it holding me back? Responsibility also affects your relationships. It means you stop expecting others to fix your emotions, to validate your worth, or to carry your burdens. You begin to stand on your own foundation. You take responsibility for how you communicate, how you treat others, and how you respond in difficult situations. And as a result, your relationships become healthier, stronger, and more balanced. One of the most powerful aspects of responsibility is that it creates consistency. When you no longer rely on mood or motivation, you begin to show up daily regardless of how you feel. And consistency over time produces results that occasional effort never can. It is not what you do once in a while that shapes your life. It is what you do every day. And here is the truth most people don't want to hear. The life you have right now is, to a large extent, the result of the choices you have made. That may be uncomfortable to accept, but it is also incredibly empowering. Because if your past choices created your current reality, then your present choices can create a different future. You are not stuck. You are not limited. You are not defined by where you started, but you are responsible for where you go from here. So when you wake up each morning and say, I am responsible for my life, say it with conviction. Say it with understanding. Say it knowing that you are stepping into a role that requires courage, discipline, and honesty, but also one that gives you power, direction, and control. Because at the end of the day, no one else can live your life for you. No one else can make your decisions, take your actions, or build your future. Help may come, support may exist, but responsibility is yours. And once you fully accept that, once you stop running from it and start embracing it, you will realize that the same thing that once felt like pressure is actually the very thing that sets you free. The second line you must declare is, I have something valuable to offer the world. There is a quiet danger in living your life without recognizing your own value. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't always look like failure. Sometimes it looks like hesitation. Sometimes it looks like playing small, staying silent, holding back ideas, or constantly comparing yourself to others. And over time, it creates a pattern where you begin to believe that what you have to offer is not enough, not needed needed or not important. That belief is one of the greatest limitations a human being can place on themselves, because the truth is, you were not created empty. You were not designed to simply exist, to observe life from the sidelines, or to spend your years doubting your own worth. There is something inside you, something real, something meaningful that carries value. It may be your perspective, your creativity, your resilience, your ability to connect with people, your ideas, your skills, your experiences. Whatever it is, it matters. And when you begin your day by saying, I have something valuable to offer the world, you are not trying to convince yourself of a lie. You are reminding yourself of a truth that you may have ignored for too long. But let's be clear about something. This is not about arrogance. It is not about believing you are better than others. It is about understanding that you are not less than others. There is a difference between ego and self-worth. Ego tries to prove superiority. Self-worth understands inherent value. And when you operate from self-worth, you don't need to compete with everyone around you. You simply focus on becoming the best version of yourself and contributing what only you can contribute. The problem is, many people have been conditioned to doubt themselves. Maybe it came from criticism. Maybe it came from failure. Maybe it came from being compared to others, overlooked, or told that they were not good enough. And those experiences leave marks. They shape how you see yourself. They create internal narratives that say, you're not ready, you're not capable, you don't belong here. If you don't challenge those narratives, they will control your behavior. You will hesitate when you should speak. You will shrink when you should step forward. You will delay when you should act. Not because you lack ability, but because you lack belief in your own value. This is why speaking this line every morning is so powerful. It interrupts that pattern. It gives you a moment to realign your thinking before the world starts influencing it. It allows you to consciously choose a different belief, one that supports your growth instead of limiting it. When you truly believe you have something valuable to offer, it changes how you show up. You stop asking for permission to exist in spaces that you have every right to be in. You stop waiting for validation before you take action. You begin to trust your voice, your instincts, your ideas, and that trust is essential because the world does not reward hidden potential. It responds to expressed value. It responds to people who are willing to step forward, to share, to create, to contribute. If you keep your value locked inside because of doubt or fear, the world never gets a chance to experience it, and you never get a chance to grow it. Value is not something that only exists at a high level. It's not reserved for experts, leaders, or people who have already achieved success. Value exists at every stage of your journey. Even your struggles carry value because they give you perspective. They give you lessons that someone else may need to hear. They give you insight that can help someone else move forward. You don't have to know everything to offer something. In fact, some of the most powerful contributions come from people who are still in the process of learning because they understand the journey in a way that others may not. They can relate, they can connect, they can speak from experience, not just theory. But again, none of that matters if you don't believe it. Belief is the foundation of action. If you believe your contribution matters, you will find ways to express it. If you believe it doesn't, you will find reasons to hold back. And over time, those small decisions, whether to act or not, create very different lives. When you declare, I have something valuable to offer the world, you're also making a commitment. A commitment not to hide. A commitment not to waste what you've been given. A commitment to develop it, to refine it, to use it. Because value is not static. It grows with use. The more you invest in your skills, your mindset, your character, the more valuable your contribution becomes. But that growth requires effort. It requires discipline. It requires you to take yourself seriously enough to improve. This is where many people get stuck. They want to feel valuable, but they are not willing to do the work that builds value. They want confidence without preparation. They want recognition without effort. But real confidence comes from competence. It comes from knowing that you have invested time and energy into becoming better. So when you speak this line, don't just let it be words. Let it be a reminder that you have a responsibility to develop what you have. to learn, to grow, to push yourself beyond your comfort zone. Because the more you grow, the more you have to offer. Another important aspect of this mindset is understanding that your value is not determined by immediate results. Sometimes you will put in effort and not see instant success. Sometimes your ideas will not be accepted right away. Sometimes your contribution will go unnoticed. But that does not mean it lacks value. Value and recognition are not the same thing. There are many things that are valuable but not immediately recognized. And if you base your belief in yourself solely on external validation, you will always be unstable. Because recognition is unpredictable. It depends on timing, environment, and many factors outside your control. But when your sense of value comes from within, from your understanding of who you are and what you are capable of, you become stable. You continue to show up. You continue to contribute. You continue to grow, regardless of how quickly others notice. This stability is what separates those who persist from those who quit. It also allows you to appreciate others without feeling threatened by them. When you know you have value, you don't feel the need to compare yourself constantly. You can respect someone else's strengths without questioning your own. You can learn from others without feeling inferior. And that creates a healthier, more focused mindset. Your journey is yours. Your value is yours. And it does not need to look like anyone else's. There is also a deeper level to this idea. When you recognize your value, you begin to understand that your life has purpose beyond just personal success. It becomes about contribution, about impact, about using what you have to make a difference, even in small ways. Not everyone is called to reach millions of people, but everyone is capable of influencing someone. Through your actions, your words, your example, you have the ability to affect the people around you, and that influence matters. Sometimes the value you offer is not in what you achieve, but in how you show up for others, in your integrity, in your consistency, in your willingness to help, to listen, to support. These things may not always be celebrated, but they are deeply valuable. So when you wake up and say, I have something valuable to offer the world, say it with understanding. Say it knowing that your value is not limited to one area, one skill, or one moment. It is expressed in many ways across many situations. Say it knowing that you are not here to be invisible. Say it knowing that your voice, your presence, your effort, they all matter. And then carry that belief into your day, into your actions, into your decisions. Let it guide how you speak, how you work, how you interact with others. Because the moment you truly believe that you have something valuable to offer, you stop waiting to be chosen and you start choosing yourself. And that is where everything begins to change. The third line you must say is, I will not be controlled by fear today. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in human life, not because it is always loud, but because it is often quiet, subtle, and deeply persuasive. It doesn't always show up as panic or obvious anxiety. Sometimes it comes disguised as logic. It sounds reasonable. It tells you to wait a little longer, to prepare a little more, to avoid the risk, to stay where it's safe. And if you're not aware of it, you can spend years living under its influence without ever realizing that it has been guiding your decisions. That is why the statement, I will not be controlled by fear today, is not just a sentence. It is a declaration of independence. It is you deciding that fear may exist, but it will not lead. It will not decide your actions. It will not dictate your direction. Understand this clearly. Fear itself is not the enemy. Fear is natural. It is part of your design. It exists to protect you from danger. But the problem is that fear does not always distinguish between real danger and perceived discomfort. It reacts to anything unfamiliar, anything uncertain, anything that challenges your current identity. So the same fear that protects you from harm can also prevent you from growth. And if you allow it, it will keep you in a cycle of comfort that slowly limits your potential. Most people are not held back by a lack of ability. They are held back by a fear of failure, a fear of rejection, a fear of judgment, a fear of not being good enough. These fears don't always stop them completely, but they slow them down. They make them hesitate. They cause them to overthink, to delay, to second guess themselves. And over time, those small hesitations add up. Opportunities pass. Ideas remain unexpressed. Dreams stay unpursued. Not because they were impossible, but because fear was given control. When you wake up in the morning and say, I will not be controlled by fear today, you are making a conscious decision to interrupt that pattern. You are acknowledging that fear may show up, but you are also deciding that it will not be the deciding factor in your behavior. This requires awareness because fear is often automatic. It appears quickly, sometimes before you even have time to think. A new opportunity comes, and immediately your mind begins to list reasons why it might not work. You think about speaking up, and instantly you imagine how others might judge you. You consider taking a step forward, and your mind shows you all the ways it could go wrong. If you are not aware, you will accept those thoughts as truth, but they are not truth. They are possibilities, and more importantly, they are incomplete possibilities. Fear focuses on negative outcomes. It rarely shows you what could go right. It rarely highlights the growth, the learning, the progress that could come from taking action. So part of refusing to be controlled by fear is learning to question it. When fear speaks, instead of immediately obeying, you pause. You ask yourself, is this real danger or is this just discomfort? And you ask, what is the worst that could happen and can I handle it? Most of the time, you will find that the consequences you fear are not as severe as your mind makes them seem. And even if they happen, you are capable of dealing with them. This is how courage begins to develop. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. It is the willingness to move forward even when you feel uncertain. And every time you do that, every time you take action in the presence of fear, you weaken its control over you. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. You may feel nervous, unsure, even hesitant, but that is part of the process. Growth is uncomfortable by nature. It requires you to step beyond what is familiar, beyond what feels safe. But here is what most people don't realize. The comfort you protect by avoiding fear is temporary, but the limitations it creates are long-term. Every time you avoid something because of fear, you reinforce the belief that you cannot handle it. You teach your mind that the fear was justified, and that makes it stronger the next time. On the other hand, every time you face fear and take action, you send a different message. You say, I can handle this. And that builds confidence, not theoretical confidence, but real experience-based confidence. This is why action is so important. You cannot think your way out of fear. You cannot wait for it to disappear before you move. If you wait until you feel completely ready, you will wait forever. The only way to reduce fear is through exposure, through doing the very thing that makes you uncomfortable. And as you do, something begins to shift. What once felt intimidating starts to feel manageable. What once felt impossible starts to feel achievable. Not because the situation changed, but because you changed. Your perspective expanded. Your confidence grew. Another important aspect of this mindset is understanding that fear often signals growth. If something scares you, but it is aligned with your goals, your values, your direction, there is a high chance that it is worth pursuing. Because growth rarely happens in areas that feel completely safe and familiar. It happens at the edge of your comfort zone. So, instead of always trying to avoid fear, learn to interpret it. Not all fear is negative. Some fear is a sign that you are stepping into something meaningful, that you are stretching yourself, that you are moving toward a higher level of potential. But again, this only becomes useful if you refuse to let fear control you. There is also a social dimension to fear. Many people are deeply influenced by the fear of judgment. They worry about what others will think, how they will be perceived, whether they will be accepted. And this fear can be paralyzing. It can stop you from expressing your ideas, from pursuing your goals, from being authentic. But consider this, no matter what you do, people will have opinions. Some will support you, some will criticize you, some will misunderstand you. That is a reality you cannot control. So, the question becomes, will you live your life based on your purpose or based on other people's opinions? When you say, I will not be controlled by fear today, you are also saying that you will not allow the fear of judgment to silence you. You are choosing authenticity over approval. You are choosing growth over comfort. This does not mean you become reckless or ignore feedback. It means you evaluate feedback wisely without allowing fear to distort your self-perception. Another layer of fear is the fear of failure. Many people avoid action because they are afraid of making mistakes, of not succeeding, of proving themselves wrong. But this fear is based on a misunderstanding of what failure actually is. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of the process of success. Every mistake carries information. Every setback provides feedback. Every unsuccessful attempt teaches you something that moves you closer to a better approach. But if you allow the fear of failure to stop you from trying, you remove the possibility of learning. You stay in a safe but stagnant state where nothing changes. When you remove fear as the controlling force, you begin to see failure differently. Not as something to avoid at all costs, but as something to learn from and grow through. This mindset creates resilience. It allows you to recover quickly, to adapt, to continue moving forward even when things don't go as planned. And over time, that resilience becomes one of your greatest strengths. There is also a connection between fear and identity. Sometimes fear is not just about the action, it is about what that action represents. Stepping into something new often requires you to let go of an old version of yourself, and that can be uncomfortable. You may have identified as someone who plays it safe, who avoids risk, who stays in the background. Changing that identity requires you to act differently, and that can feel unfamiliar. But growth requires change. It requires you to redefine who you are. When you declare that you will not be controlled by fear, you are also declaring that you are willing to evolve, that you are willing to step into a new version of yourself, even if it feels uncertain at first. This is not something that happens in one day. It is a daily practice. Each morning when you say those words, you are preparing your mind. You are setting an intention. You are reminding yourself that fear may show up, but it does not have authority over your actions. And throughout the day, you will have opportunities to live that out. Moments where you can speak instead of staying silent. Moments where you can act instead of delaying. Moments where you can step forward instead of stepping back. In those moments, remember your declaration. Remember that you chose not to be controlled by fear, and then act accordingly. Because at the end of the day, your life is not shaped by what you think about doing. It is shaped by what you actually do. And if fear is in control, your actions will be limited. But if you are in control, even with fear present, your possibilities expand. So don't wait for fear to disappear. It may not. Instead, build the strength to move with it, through it, and beyond it. And as you do, you will discover something powerful. The things you once feared were not barriers, they were gateways. Gateways to growth, to confidence, to a version of yourself that you could not reach by staying comfortable. That is why this line matters. Not because it removes fear, but because it removes its authority. And once fear no longer controls you, you are free to become who you were meant to be. The fourth line you must declare is, I will grow no matter what happens. Growth is not something that happens by accident. It is not something reserved for certain people, certain environments, or certain seasons of life. Growth is a decision, a conscious daily commitment to become better than you were yesterday. And when you wake up each morning and declare, I will grow no matter what happens, you are choosing a mindset that transforms every situation, every challenge, every outcome into an opportunity for progress. Most people tie their growth to conditions. They say, I will improve when things get easier, or I will focus when I have more time, or I will change when everything is going right. But life does not operate that way. Conditions are rarely perfect. There will always be obstacles, distractions, setbacks, and unexpected turns. If you wait for the right conditions, you will spend most of your life waiting. The person who grows consistently understands this. Growth is not dependent on circumstances. It is driven by commitment. When you say, I will grow no matter what happens, you are removing excuses. You are deciding that whether the day goes as planned or not, whether things work out or fall apart, whether you succeed or struggle, you will still learn, you will still improve, you will still move forward in some way. This mindset is powerful because it makes you adaptable. Instead of being thrown off by difficulties, you begin to work through them. Instead of seeing problems as interruptions, you begin to see them as part of the process. And that shift changes everything. Consider how most people respond to challenges. When something goes wrong, they become discouraged. They question themselves. They slow down or stop altogether. They interpret the difficulty as a sign that they are not capable, not ready, or not meant for what they are pursuing. But a growth-oriented mindset interprets challenges differently. It asks, what is this teaching me? It looks for lessons instead of reasons to quit. It understands that difficulty is not a signal to stop. It is often a signal that you are stretching beyond your current limits. And that stretching is necessary because you cannot grow by staying where you are comfortable. You cannot become stronger without resistance. You cannot develop new skills without practicing things you are not yet good at. Growth requires effort, and effort often feels uncomfortable. This is why many people avoid it. Comfort is easy. It feels safe. It requires little energy. But comfort also keeps you in the same place. It maintains the status quo. And over time, that lack of movement becomes stagnation. Growth, on the other hand, requires you to face discomfort. It asks you to try, to fail, to adjust, to try again. It asks you to step into uncertainty and trust that you will figure things out along the way. When you commit to growing, no matter what happens, you begin to accept discomfort as part of the journey. You no longer see it as something to avoid, but as something to work through. And that acceptance gives you an advantage because while others are retreating from challenges, you are engaging with them. Another important aspect of growth is understanding that progress is not always visible in the short term. There will be days when you put in effort and see little to no immediate results. Days when you feel like you are not improving, when things seem to be moving slowly, when your progress feels insignificant. In those moments, it is easy to become discouraged. But growth is often happening beneath the surface. Just like a seed planted in the ground does not immediately show visible signs of development, your efforts may take time to produce noticeable results. Skills develop gradually. Mindsets shift over time. Habits are built through repetition. If you expect instant results, you may lose patience. But if you trust the process, you will stay consistent. And consistency is the key. It is not what you do once in a while that defines your growth. It is what you do repeatedly. Small daily improvements compound over time. A little more discipline, a little more focus, a little more effort each day. These things add up. When you commit to growth regardless of circumstances, you remove the need for motivation to always be present because motivation is inconsistent. Some days you will feel inspired, energized, ready to take on anything. Other days you will feel tired, distracted, unmotivated. If you rely solely on how you feel, your progress will be inconsistent. But when you rely on commitment, you show up anyway. You take action even when you don't feel like it. You do the work because you understand that growth is a priority, not an option. This builds discipline, and discipline is what sustains growth over the long term. Another important element of this mindset is how you handle failure. Failure is often misunderstood. Many people see it as a final outcome, a sign that they are not capable. But in reality, failure is feedback. It provides information about what worked, what didn't, and what needs to be adjusted. When you adopt a growth mindset, failure loses its negative power. It becomes a tool, a source of insight, something that helps you refine your approach. Instead of saying, I failed, so I should stop, you say, I learned something, so I can improve. This shift allows you to keep moving forward without being held back by fear of mistakes. And over time, you begin to realize that many of the things you once saw as setbacks were actually stepping stones. They pushed you to think differently, to adapt, to develop new strategies. They made you better. Growth also requires self-awareness. You cannot improve what you do not understand.